The pundits like to slice and dice our country into red states and blue states.
The time for empty talk is over.
You don't get to do anything you want to.
But
millions of people have got to stand up and demand that we have a government that represents all of us, not the 1%.
do not allow anyone to tell you that it cannot be done.
Welcome to our podcast, our first episode of Kleptocracy podcast. The name was not easy to come up with. We're going to talk about the COVID relief bill that Congress passed, but you know, it's been a fun thing. Trump signed it, but he didn't want to sign it because there's a bunch of stuff in the bill that's not so good for regular day Americans. You know, it's great for other people, but not so much great for us. So we're gonna go through a couple stuff we found and just kind of talk about it. So this is from the Washington Post, pretty reputable source, I think. Are they the one that's owned by Bezos, or is that different people?
I believe the Washington Post is owned by Bezos.
Oof, okay, well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So they went through it, and they have a bunch of stuff they went through. Let's see here. There's some bullet points here. Let's see here. There's one in here. $17 billion loan for business critical to maintain national security. That's kind of neat, but as it says here, it's kind of really just for Boeing. So, I mean, that's great that they're going to even, you know, a loan to Boeing, and it makes sense. But like, if you're a company and you're like bad with your money, why should I have to bail you out? That's my opinion.
I feel like there's a lot of parallels of like, as they call it, like pork in the bill, like needless spending of like, there's a lot of foreign aid in these provisions. Like, what is it, north of over 500 billion, if I understand. A lot of it, I think, is going to Israel. You could pull up some of the details, but yeah, I just thought it was kind of almost embarrassing that most Americans only get about $300 a week and a $600 one-time stimulus check, trying to basically present a stimulus bill that didn't even originally have one until Bernie and other progressives basically pressured Congress into doing that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, $25 billion loans for airline industry. Like certain things that, like, I get it. Like if you're an industry like the airlines and you're like suffering because of COVID, like that would make sense. But giving money to foreign countries, it doesn't really make sense.
In the middle of pandemic, yeah.
Right. It's weird. It's just
from what I understand, a lot of Republicans push that, which to me just seems really, I mean, both parties are basically compromised by the military industrial complex for the most part, but I just thought that was really telling that they slipped a lot of provisions in like both the spending bill and the stimulus. It was just like one of them is also an illegal streaming, like making it a felony when it used to be a misdemeanor. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of like slipped in provisions that wasn't publicly disclosed. It's kind of
well, yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about wasteful government spending, I mean, there's like this.
I thought that's what Republicans did. I thought that's what they were, and libertarians. They're the ones that, you know, express that.
Well, when you got things like help for manufacturers of innovative sunscreen technology, like that's pretty important for COVID relief to make sure that you have good sunscreen. It's just like you're gonna waste money for that.
Most people don't even look at the sun when in the middle of pandemic. I'm pretty sure most people
we're inside. We can't go outside, but we gotta make it's just Right here, a 6-month extension of funding for abstinence-only education. That really screams COVID relief on it. You know,
Absence. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, you can't
you
get
gotta be
COVID if you're
abstinent.
abstinent.
Yeah, no
True.
skin-to-skin contact. I mean,
Technically, that's true.
Power off.
Um, let's see here. An expansion of services that health savings accounts, which mostly benefit wealthier people. That's cool. Provision allowing many hotel chains to access $350 billion in loans intended for small businesses if their individual hotel employ fewer than 500 workers each. So if I were, that makes sense. I mean, hotels are suffering, obviously, people aren't traveling. So, I mean, that's fair. That's the Washington Post. Let me open up, what is this place? This is
I
the
know.
Medium. I've never heard of, I've read Medium a few times. There's like, this is a weird one. So like 6.5 billion in new Navy weapons and Air Force missiles, which is weird because like earlier when President Trump was in office, he increased the military budget. So now they're asking for more money on top of that. And it's like,
Yeah,
that's not COVID.
Bernie proposed a 10% like deduction, I believe, from the military industrial complex, that one bill. Of course,
Yep.
it got shut down, but instead of like doing what we should be doing and rolling back funding, it's just becoming even more bloated. It's pretty asinine.
You know, the Space Force also received $2 billion in the COVID relief bill. I didn't think the Space Force was a real thing. I thought it was like a joke and then like a show on Netflix. Apparently,
Yeah,
it's a real
I thought it was a
thing.
Netflix show. Yeah, I didn't.
I had no idea. Let's see here. This person on the Twitter says it's a $500 million for Israel in the relief bill. That's pretty important. We got to take care of Israel because, you know, 500 million for Israel. I mean, that's Burma, 134
I want to touch on that real quick because I believe it was in the 60s. There was this song in the lyrics, it was talking about like the space race and how like we have enough money to send someone on the moon, but like there's basically starving people and people in poverty and homelessness in the 60s. And now I feel like this is like even more, like 10 times as magnified now as it was then. It's just with the budget that they have.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you get the government officials that say we don't have the money for improved infrastructure. We don't have the money to give Americans an extra stimulus. We don't have money for all these things, but we have billions of dollars for other countries.
Yeah, or, you know, for the Space Force. I mean, imperialism in space.
We need that. I get it. Like here, you know, $135 million for Burma, 85 million for Cambodia, 250 for Egypt, 250 for Jordan, 250 for Lebanon,
Yeah,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 450 million for Ukraine. Like,
that's a lot for Ukraine. That seems.
Yeah, it's a lot. The whole thing is a lot. It's a lot of money to go to foreign countries and not so much in America. And I understand why. And it's gonna come off like kind of shitty. But the reason is because we want to keep we want to keep allies in strategic regions around the world. That's really why. What we're doing is we're giving these countries money to help secure our sphere of influence in that region amidst China's growing sphere of influence. That's really what's happening. And it's shitty, and I don't agree with it, and I think we should use our money here domestically, but I understand why they do it. I think politicians should just be more transparent as to why.
Yeah, I would be more advocating to, like, you know, give underdeveloped countries for, like, say, contraceptive measures or, you know, medical reasons or agriculture. But like for this is just purely for like superpower, you know, strategy, like against China. You know, like you said, it's basically about unifying allies, but I don't necessarily agree that there should be any superpower, let alone, you know, us and competing with China.
Well, I mean, if we hold on to our hegemony, uh, then we just remain the top power in the world. We have to spend money to do that. And I understand that. However, I think the COVID relief bill is not the place to make that investment. I think for the COVID relief bill, it needs to be COVID only relief. And then if you want to do your foreign allies and other things, then that can be a separate bill.
Well, this is what I don't understand. Why doesn't that just become part of like the bloated military budget? Why don't they roll back spending, especially if you have these deficit hawks who care about, or they use austerity? Why don't you peel back, more spending with the $750 billion, that was just implemented? Why can't you use some of that aid, to cover some of those expenses? 750 billion. I mean, you can't tell me that. I don't know.
They don't want to cut into the military budget. That's really what it is. I mean, that's
right.
But if they America for 50 years.
But if they did, they could implement some of this money and funding and allocate it towards that.
Well, I know, and I agree with it, but that's on both sides of the aisle. That's not going to happen.
No, not when you're bought out by Raytheon and
Boeing and
Lockheed
and
exactly.
Stark Industries, etc.
Military industrial complex in a nutshell.
Another one here is makes illegal streaming a felony.
Yeah, this is one of my biggest qualms I've had. One of the senators that basically advocated for this has taken funding from like Sony and numerous corporations in the entertainment industry, and I just didn't feel this was not the time or place, or I didn't agree with the period, because I think a misdemeanor already sufficed the penalty. This it wasn't very clear, or like coherent of how this would affect streamers, say like streaming video games with like copyrighted material. That's one of the biggest things people were concerned about, is like, what if they're playing, say, Cyberpunk, the new Cyberpunk game, and they're listening to the radio and a song comes on, because they already have DMCA issues that like YouTube already has. So I don't know. I just I thought this was basically very disingenuous and kind of callous to do. So
the thing I find interesting too about that is Cyberpunk in the game have settings where you can actually turn off music, copyrighted music, if you're going to stream it. They have that in the game where you can actually turn off copyrighted music, so you don't get in trouble. Yeah, it's just weird that they have to take that extra step to protect people who are going to stream the game, who are going to create content, etc. It's weird. It's a weird thing to make streaming a felony. Like it says, and I streamed something illegal. That's a felony. I'm going to go to prison for the felony. I'm going to lose my voting rights.
We already have the DMCA, like I was saying, like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Yeah, that was implemented into law in the 90s. So I think that provision, like, honestly, like, I understand like adapting to the modern age, but this is such an out of touch, like from the opposite end that we should be going to, especially with copyright videos that are struck down on YouTube for independent content creators. So I agree with what you're saying. The sentiment.
And this is probably, pardon my coarse language here, but this is probably the Democrats doing this. We know the Democratic side really care about Hollywood elitists.
Well, one of them, I believe there was two senators that co-sponsored this bill. One was a Democrat, but the other was a Republican.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
But the one I was referring to, he's basically bought out by super PACs from the entertainment industry. You have, I believe Sony was one of them, and Hollywood, just in general. Like, there's just numerous corporate ties to the super.
A shitty argument, a shitty thing that a lot of people use now. As the Democratic Party has done that the past 30 years, have really cared more about Hollywood elitists than working class people, and making streaming a felony is an obvious hit to like normal working class people.
Yeah, it doesn't benefit anyone except, basically the 1% and those who are elitists in the entertainment industry. I mean, and the music industry too. Like, who does this, or
Sure.
included, I should say, like, who does this really benefit the most? To me, it kind of ties to the fucking military industrial, or sorry, the private prison complex. This is just another incentive. You're going to give a felony, like you said, you're going to strip people's
10
voting
years in
rights
prison.
up to 10 years. Like, that is not excessive. Like,
Well, a lot of
I
it.
just,
This is why I
so
think
tone deaf.
what it
Sorry, go ahead.
is we're seeing places like Oregon making like drugs legal in their states, and marijuana legal in a lot of other states. So we're probably seeing a drop in drug related felonies.
Exactly.
And so now they need another way to get that money back into that system. It's trading one for another thing. That's all they're doing.
Yeah, it just ties into the whole principle of our economic system, just, profiteers off of incarceration. So
Another thing here is tax deductions for 3 martini lunches. Let's see here. Basically, what it is it makes it easier for businesses to write off meals. So if I were a wealthy business person and I took some clients out for a dinner, I could write off most of it as a business,
yeah,
which is great if I had the money to do that. Like I can't afford it.
you have $600, dude. Go for it.
That's it. That's all on me. Don't worry, I'll get it back as a business expense later.
Did you hear? I heard there was another provision that mentioned, like, was it horse racing or owning horses? There was some like incentive to where, like, unless you have like the means to own, like, because it's expensive to maintain and own like,
A horse?
a horse and land to, yeah. And like most people, unless they're, inherit a farm from their family, aren't gonna have a horse, you know what I mean? Or they have the means to do it. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, this one is trying to incentivize more rich people to go out and dine and help the restaurant industry because then they can write off more money.
Yeah.
Which, sure, I could see that happening, but like we're not allowed to dine out. So
Exactly.
benefiting, like maybe if they decided, oh yeah, we'll just meet at my apartment or at my office and we'll get an Uber Eats, like that's a different thing. But it's weird. Good for people who can do that, who can write off that money. Good for them. I'm not going to be able to. The reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. That's in the COVID bill.
Yeah, I heard about that. I want to elaborate on this.
Go ahead.
I want to. Well, I mean, sorry. I want you to read into this. I just, on the surface level. Let me.
Let's see here.
Yeah, backtrack. But yeah.
Highlight it. Interference by the government of the People's Republic of China or any other government in the process of recognizing a successor or reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama and any future Dalai Lamas would represent a clear abuse of the right to religious freedom of Tibetan Buddhists and the Tibetan people. So basically, it's a check on China and other countries or other governments or other people who want to interfere in the religious freedom in Tibet. So really what this is, like, it's interesting, but again, I think this specific part of the bill ties into the keeping allies in strategic regions. It's a check on China's growing power, and that's what this is. But it's weird that this made it into the COVID relief bill. They couldn't just pass this later. They had to do it within the bill. It's
I don't see the correlation. Yeah, like, what does this have to do with any relief, financial relief related to COVID? It just doesn't seem relevant to me. Like, to me, it just seems like, again, why wouldn't a provision like that go into like something, this is not a pertinent issue, in my opinion. But if you're going to have a vote on it, why don't you have that in a standalone bill or a different spending bill? Because to me, both the spending bill and the stimulus, they're like two different things, right? But they clump them together and it becomes convoluted. You know what I mean? Because isn't the stimulus 900 billion, right? And then the spending bill, I don't know, is it like over $1 trillion? So like it becomes convoluted which provisions are in which. Like that's another issue. Because this isn't being like disclosed to the public that much. You know what I mean? Like not coherently like it should be.
No, and that's the
Like
problem with politics.
mainstream media. Yeah.
It's the mainstream media, but it's also politicians in general. It's hard to
Keep them accountable.
be transparent and explain things in a way that's going to reach mass amount of people. So like if I were an elected official and I, supported certain things in this bill or whatever, I'd have to go to media outlets, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, etc., and try to get what I want to say out. But they're not going to report on what is in the bill. They're going to report on what they think is bad in the bill and try to frame a narrative about it and give it to the consumer. They're not going to tell you, oh, it actually does this or does this or does this. So what some politicians are starting to do, instead of relying on the media, the mainstream media, is they're starting to use their social media accounts to explain things directly to people.
Mm.
And that's something I'll give Trump a lot of credit on, is he's able to bypass the media and just go straight to people. We're seeing that a lot with Sanders. We're seeing it a lot with AOC. They just bypass traditional media and just use social media and just talk directly to people. I think that's the most effective and efficient way to reach voters, because social media is not going to try to frame a story. You're just telling it on your story with your phone, and that's it.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that I've had, like, obviously when you have a nuanced position, it depends what you're talking about, but like in terms of like the censorship on Twitter, like I find that pretty alarming. Like people are, willfully, they're not disagreeing with like the notion of, say, just like the censorship of like what's deemed fake news and what's not because it's anti-Trump, but like they disregard like the left of like the ramifications, and implications it has. And I don't think it's good to give an oligarch or technocratic approach, like when you have like social media platforms that should be regulated like a utility, like Facebook or Twitter. I see a lot of people, advocating for like just censorship, of misinformation. But I just think that's a really slippery slope, because it hurts content creators, independent ones, the most. And then basically it gives, the most incentive to corporations, especially, like say CNN, MSNBC, even like for entertainment, like late night show hosts, like, things like that nature. You know what I mean? Like it makes independent content creators like they don't have their algorithm has been changed like multiple times, and basically this just reminds me of that, because I've seen a lot of people, and this is like one of my biggest issues with a lot of Democrats is, pushing for censorship, because I've seen a lot of people, just because it's anti-Trump rhetoric, to advocate these measures. But in my opinion, it just goes against, the freedom of speech. And that, again, that's pretty problematic in the long term. They're not thinking in the long term, it's a short term solution to something that's not,
Yeah, it's weird. The text of the bill is 5,593 pages long, and it was released only a few hours before lawmakers voted on it. So it's interesting that that Congress, or the party leadership in Congress, which is is that Schumer in Congress, or is that, or no?
yeah,
Let me
Schumer is in the Senate, But
then would be the leader of the House, right?
yeah, she's a Speaker of the House.
So basically, her group or whatever faction or whatever you want to call it, and another leadership created this bill and then gave it to the elected officials only hours before they were going to vote on it. Like they met in secret, they threw all the stuff together, and then they gave it to people, like 3-4 hours before they were set to vote on it. Here, read 6,000 pages in a couple hours. Good luck. Like that's kind of, that's pretty fucked up. Like if this is a, $2.5 trillion stimulus package, 6,000 pages, and you want people to read it, you need to give them more than 4 hours. You need to give them a few days, a week to really digest everything, to meet in committees and meet with. But maybe that's why they did it, is because if they gave them too much time, then they'd find things that they don't like, and then they wouldn't vote on it.
What pisses me off about this whole ordeal is the fact that they've had several months, and Nancy Pelosi could have reached a deal even prior to the election with Steve Mnuchin. I'm not a fan of Steve Mnuchin, and I'm not, a fan of Trump or Republicans. But when you're talking about, people that need economic relief, they've had several months to basically digest and draft a bill. And it just pisses me off because this just felt like such a last ditch effort to avoid a government shutdown, and Trump could have signed this like right after, or, right before the 26th, for when a lot of, say that, the unemployment benefits ran out. And to me, this whole thing just felt rushed. And even AOC she stated that on Twitter, of how like they just got the bill like 3 hours ago and they're supposed to vote on it. I don't think in principle, like, how could you expect someone to read thousands of pages and digest that? That just doesn't seem viable.
That's their idea.
It's erratic. Yeah.
If they were given too much time, then they would see things and go, oh, I don't like that, or this is dumb, or this is not really that, and then they wouldn't vote for it. That's why. And so if they only give them enough time to really understand just the few points in it, then they vote on it. It's, and a lot of it too with Trump's administration, they had months to figure it out. But what was more of a priority for the campaign was trying to overturn the election. That was
which he's still trying to do.
It's not going to happen.
Throw a coup. Yeah. I don't find that funny. It's really not a laughing matter. Like, to me,
instead of American people are actually hurting, he's just trying to win the election again, or try to be the president again. And it's whatever. Like, people already voted. You need to let that go, and you need to let your administration work to really get people help. If you as a president, you as a political leader, swore to help the people, and then when people need your help, you just kind of ignore them and try to overturn an election, that's really not helping people.
And the most infuriating part, like, about this is like the fact that, like, I've seen a lot of establishment Democrats basically celebrate, like they encourage Trump to basically try to overthrow the election results and throw a coup. And I'm like, I don't think throwing a coup, especially given our track record of other governments, is like really a laughing matter. It's kind of, it's pretty serious and fucked up. And they're just, egging him on because they think it's anti-Trump and they think it's funny. But to me, that's just kind of shows like how shallow they, a lot of, when they say people say they're anti-Trump, it's like, well, are you talking about policy, or are you talking about decorum and superficial and shallow, ideas? Because to me, this isn't like something you should promote. I just have to say that, like, that's just one thing that's kind of bugged me, because I've seen a lot of the blue wave Democrats, on Twitter that I've seen, try to encourage that. And I don't know. I just don't think that that's a good idea, like, he's unhinged as it is, the
idea is to divide and conquer. That's really the idea. We need to pit the working class people against each other. That's really what they're trying to do. They hold on to their power if they keep people squabbling on the bottom. That's, I mean, that's, that's
Oh
what,
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
and
because I've seen. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to say something real quick. Regards to that illegal streaming bill, I mean, I've seen a right wing, who's someone who considers themselves conservative, even allude to just how irrelevant and undermining this whole streaming being a felony issue is. You know what I mean? Because not only is it irrelevant, but it's damaging when YouTubers already have to go through DMCA strikes, copyright strikes, But that just goes to show it's more of a class war than it is a right versus left. Really, it's more of a class war,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's really, when you think about it this way, we're getting a little bit of relief, not as much as we should, paying our taxes and all. But, we're getting $600 and maybe $2,000 later. Who knows? I don't know. That money is just going to go to the top 1% again anyway. It'll pay my rent, and then that's it. But it's just going to go to the top 1%. That's what it's going to do. Small businesses aren't open. People need food, etc. Where are they going to shop? Oh, they have to go to Walmart or places that are allowed to be open. And that's the real kicker is, and this is more of I would say, a conservative talking point. A lot of people are irritated because of all the shutdown stuff, because it hurt small businesses. It hurt Main Street, and it really benefited Wall Street. And that's a legitimate concern. If you're a small business, a bar, a bookstore, a small grocery store, whatever, you're not allowed to be open. Sorry. Oh, but Walmart, you can be open because you're essential. And so what's going to happen, a lot of businesses are going under. A lot of people who've taken out loans on their homes to open those businesses, they could, be in risk of foreclosure. That's going to ruin the housing market. And those people that don't have their businesses anymore, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go work for Walmart or Amazon to try to pay back those loans that they had. And that's the real issue. That's what's going to happen is people are going to lose, their businesses, and they're going to have to work for the big guy. And there's really nothing you can do about it because it's just how it is now.
It's like a feedback loop, because we already have a problem with small businesses, shutting down anyway. A lot of foreclosures, on small and medium-sized businesses. And I agree. It's really problematic. I think obviously we should. I mean, I'm for regulations to address for certain health measures to get this pandemic situation under control, but at the same time you need to pay people to stay home. The economic response has just been abhorrent and abysmal. I mean, it's just basically inept, and you can't expect small businesses to survive without some type of economic relief. The PPP and the loans, they all dried up, and a lot what I haven't seen any mainstream media talk about is how much those funds dried up from businesses that make millions of dollars that aren't small to medium-sized businesses have taken these loans out of the first stimulus. And I haven't seen that talking point. I haven't seen that mentioned hardly at all. Maybe on Twitter, but that's about it. And and now 40 businesses that were shut down during the pandemic are permanently closed. A report came out a couple months ago stating that. And I agree. It's just like a giant feedback loop,
Yeah,
where if you,
there's a few businesses here that have actually shut down too because of it.
yeah,
They have to shut down. There's no way they can stay open because there's just not enough customers. They've had to get rid of employees, all this other stuff. And it sucks. It's really bad. And and if we would have known about COVID, I don't know, 2 months, if somebody would have known about it and told us about it before it happened, there probably could have been a much better response a COVID relief bill could have been in the works long before now, and a lot of businesses could have been saved, which means a lot of loans and debt. It's bad, and it's bad. Whoever was the leader at the time when this happened was pretty shitty in their response, I will say. I mean, crisis
Yeah,
management. The administration did not do a very good job of crisis management. They just tried to mask it, no pun intended. They try to mask it and tell you not to pay attention. That's really what they try to do. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. That's not the right response you need in a crisis. You cannot tell people to not worry about it. You need to communicate efficiently and effectively and be as transparent as possible with something like this. But what the administration did was they decided to get rid of Obama's pandemic committee or whatever.
the pandemic response team. Yeah.
They got rid of that, and then there's a pandemic now. We don't know what to do. Maybe you shouldn't have got rid of that fucking thing you did. I mean, I don't. It's just, dude, it's shitty. If he would
Did you also
go ahead.
Did you also hear about the transcripts too of like he knew months ahead in advance?
That's what I'm saying. He knew
Yeah.
before anybody else did, and he just said, "Don't worry about it. It's fine. It'll go away. I'm not worried about it." And it's like, well, and then during the debates, he was like, "Well, I acted. I shut everything down. You didn't tell us why you were shutting things down. You just did it. You need to tell us why you're doing this." It's what it is he just does stuff. It's a lot of it too is because he operates in a very authoritarian way, and so he just does it without telling people why he's doing it, and that's kind of the problem. In a democracy, you're an elected leader, or you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to be transparent and communicate why you're doing something. If you're going to shut down travel from a very specific place, you need to tell people why, not just I'm going to do it. But if you would have said I'm shutting travel down from China because of this virus, people would have been like, "Oh yeah, totally do that." But he didn't. He just tried to do it, and I'm like, you can't. And that's why it came back to bite him. And then once he knew about it, he didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. I mean, granted, I will give him a lot of credit on the Operation Warp Speed that his administration did for the vaccine. That is a fantastic idea. So I'll give him credit where credit's due. So there's that. And I think that is something that his administration did do a really good job on. And so it's not all negative. And that's something I'm kind of irritated with, as much as I don't care for Trump, the person, and a lot of the policies I don't like that he's done. But there's a few things policy-wise that he has done that have been good. I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, everything Trump does is bad." And it's like, that's not fair. That's not the right way to look at politics.
No, you have to have a nuanced like position, I think. You can't just allude to everything Trump does as bad. Like that's part of the point I was trying to state earlier too is I agree. Like, when people saw him, talk to Kim Jong-un, even though I think it was like basically a staged photo op, but that doesn't detract from the fact that he's trying to de-escalate war. I don't want to get in a nuclear arms race with North Korea.
No.
That's not, I'm sorry that, you've been fed this bullshit narrative from MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News promoting war. But, if Trump does take a step to be anti-war, I agree with him. I don't want to go to another war. Then again, I'll also call him out on him trying to escalate shit with Iran, with John Bolton when he was in his administration. So you just have to have a nuanced, position.
I think there's a lot of pressure from the military-industrial complex for that.
I think so too.
That's really what it is. I think it's another thing that I think he's done that's pretty shitty. That I think the Biden administration, when they get in there, they're gonna just get rid of is drilling in Alaska. The fracking that they're gonna do in Alaska, Trump's gonna allow them to do that. That's pretty shitty. I think that you shouldn't do that. It's the same thing with like trying to drill in the Arctic. Like, don't drill in those. Leave oil alone. Just stop. Like, you don't have to drill in every beautiful place that you see. Just leave stuff alone. It's, so like you're saying, there's a lot of nuance in politics, and there's a lot of stuff that Trump has done that I disagree with, but there's some of it where I'm like, that's actually a good idea. And I hate to admit that. And I don't hate to admit that, actually. I think that's what we need more of. I think we need more people to be like, okay, that's fair. That's good. I'll give him that. And I think that's where our mainstream media is failing. They try to create a narrative. They frame a story, create a narrative. That's really what they're doing. They're not really reporting the news. They're trying to frame this story to try to get you to continually watch, like an episodic TV show or something. That's really what they're trying to do, and it's not good. And that's why a lot of people have lost a lot of faith and trust in the media. And it's on both sides. Trump, really echoed that during his 4 years and even before that. But then you have people on the Democratic side, like your AOCs and your Bernie Sanders, who are like, yeah, the media is corrupt. It's pretty obvious what they're doing, and it's on both sides. And I think a lot of people see that now, and so it's hard. It's interesting. I think that's very interesting that we're seeing a lot of like smaller news outlets kind of come out, and a lot less people relying on like CNNs and MSNBCs and Fox and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of like Generation Z and millennials, especially, have been more catering to like independent media over like a lot of the bullshit mainstream media narratives that they've been, and the gaslighting that goes on. Because I mean, one of the biggest prevalent things, especially it's like one of the biggest reasons, why I got into politics, and at least like reading Noam Chomsky's work, he really mentioned like just the manufactured consent. Like it's absolutely true. It really is basically like a feedback loop of gaslighting, especially with the military industrial complex. You don't, but I think a lot of, younger generations of people have caught on to that. And that's why like their numbers usually kick their ass, even on YouTube. When you have like these people like with over 1 million subscribers, their ratings are actually better than a lot of mainstream media, and there's reason for that, despite the algorithm, like demonetizing them. A lot of these people have to rely on Patreons or donations. It's, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and all it does is when the little guy gets demonetized or shut down or whatever happens, all that does is it's reinforced by Wall Street. Wall Street says, hey, we don't like this source because it's against our source, so we need to get rid of it. Or we need to acquire it. We need to buy them out. We need, there's all these tactics. It's interesting to me because you live in a place where you're supposed to have freedom of speech and say what you want, especially in politics and things like that. But then, you got shut down because of this thing. Why? YouTube, for example, you can jeopardize your monetization if you cuss. You can jeopardize your monetization if you talk about COVID. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? Like that's asinine to me. So like if you're a content creator and you have these things you want to talk about, now you have to be careful on how you talk about them because you get demonetized.
Yeah, to me, it's technocratic, it's dystopian. I'd much rather go back to like a Wild West, almost frontier like format of the internet. Like at least, especially in terms of YouTube, it's just with how corporate's become.
Like 10 years ago, I would say.
Yeah, like.
But at the same time, you have to keep the lights on. And though I get that, and I understand, it is a business, and I understand that, and that's a fair point. If I were to come up with this really cool thing like a YouTube, and people were posting on there, and I'm like, oh, I want to make some money from this because I created this platform. It's a great I get that aspect, but like shutting people down because they, said fuck, or shutting them down because they talked about COVID or something. It's a form of censorship, and I think that's wrong.
I think, I mean, people have brought it up before, but to me, it just, I would much rather have, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter regulated like a public utility, more than I would giving it into the hands of, like an oligarchy, because that's basically, what we've done, like there's so much surveillance as it is, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
from Facebook and YouTube,
the thing
you
that's
know.
at it though is those are private businesses, and so part of their argument is we don't have to abide by normal regulation because we're a private business. So like when Twitter or Facebook or whatever take down certain things from certain people because this claim is disputed or this or that, we don't have to really care too much about regulations or freedom of speech or things like that because we're a private business. And it's like, no, you still have to. You're an American company. That means you have to follow our American laws. I'm sorry, but that's how it works.
The private sector just wants to be completely like isolated from the public sector, and that's
That's why
really
it's a
part of
private
it.
sector, and that's fair, but you still
But
have to
that's not,
by regulations. You don't get to do whatever you want. You still have laws and regulations that you have to follow. I'm sorry, but that's how it is.
well, that's why I advocate usually more towards the public sector, especially in terms of healthcare infrastructure, you know,
Well, I mean, if
and
you look
an open internet in general.
at if you well, let's look at like uh the Roaring Twenties. Everything was great. There was like no regulations. It was fucking fantastic for those with wealth. It was great. Everybody had a great time. Oh, and then the depression happened. Oh no, that's gonna happen. That's already happening again. Or we just president after president, regardless of which party they're in, have come in and deregulated and cut the tape for private businesses who
Well,
forked
before FDR and his New Deal and his set of regulations, I mean, that was par for the course, was that giant economic crash with the Great Depression.
yeah.
But even after FDR, after his multiple wind cycles, and when the Republicans had to set term limits because they were getting their asses kicked so bad, if you notice, like the generations of presidents afterwards, a lot of those crashes could have been avoided with a lot more regulations on Wall Street and banks, doing risky ventures, and especially with Ronald Reagan when he just came in and obliterated the public sector and union organizing. I mean, the ramifications today just I can't be overstated enough. We
Well, no,
still
that's a
feel
fair
the,
point. And
the
that
reeling
was
effects.
to bring it back full circle. What we're talking about the COVID relief bill is when you deregulate private businesses and you allow them to union bust, like Amazon that has the Pinkerton basically enforce anti labor stuff. It's just when you allow businesses to do that and you make laws like the right to work states and things like that, when people get in hard economic times, crashes happen. When you're skilled labor and you crashes happen, you're fucked. There's nothing you can do. So like for example, if I were to work somewhere, like I get my college degree and I get it and I go find a good job somewhere, I'm like, okay, cool, this is going great, and all of a sudden I go on hard times and I get fired, that's on me and that sucks. And so now I have to work for Burger King or something for $15 an hour, which is not a lot when you have a 4-year degree, and it's just it,
And the minimum wage, in
it's
some
shitty.
states is $7 an hour. So
It's 7.25. The minimum wage has been the same since like 2009. And you have people say, well, I mean, inflation. Oh, well, inflation. Like, I sure that's a fair argument, but we've seen the rich get richer. I mean, look at Bezos, who's increased his wealth $70 billion since the pandemic happened. 70 billion. But instead of
mhm.
helping his employees at Amazon or helping his employees at Whole Foods by allowing them to take sick days if they need it or paid sick leave if they need it, he told the employees in Whole Foods that they need to pool their resources together to give their fellow coworkers time off. He wasn't going to help them. $70 billion richer, the richest man in the world, can't help his own employees, and that's asinine to me. And that's exactly what this COVID bill does: is you get the rich people who own everything to come in and lobby for whatever they want. You know, they lobby money for the Dalai Lama. They lobby money for NASCAR tax breaks, whatever, you know, and then screw everyday Americans, screw the small business. You hear $600, you get $600, but Israel gets 500 million because they need it. It doesn't make sense. If this were a true capitalist country and an oligarchy or a kleptocracy, if you failed, you failed. I shouldn't have to bail you out, and I think that's fair. That's what capitalism is. If I were Boeing and I was really shitty with my money, like I am, because I'm Boeing, and I go under, then I go under. You know, I don't ask for a tax break because I decided not to put a rainy day fund. If I, as a normal person, if I go bankrupt, I go bankrupt. I can't ask the government for a bailout because I fucked up.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to also touch on is, like the fallacy of inflation. Like what pisses me off is if you looked at wages relative to today, like they were in the 80s, I mean, you'd be making probably north of $27 an hour,
Yeah.
for the minimum wage. In my opinion, and maybe, you can deem me as a socialist. I don't think $15 is even enough in itself. But even that, to a lot of these people who are deficit hawks, promote this as like radical. And it's even, they use the same rhetoric. Like I remember in Seattle, they tried to insinuate that that would damage small businesses because what they would do is they'd pay a lot of people slave wages, but have them live off of tips.
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem with that is living off tips isn't exactly consistent. And it's,
guaranteed income.
yeah, you're not gonna have fucking shareholders, walk into your restaurant every day and give you, giant tips. It's just not like viable, in the long term. Like it's not consistent. And I agree, like, we live in such an inequitable system. It's just it's insane. I mean, it's asinine that you don't have to give your workers hazard pay. Those working on the front lines who deserve hazard pay, and they deserve to be paid a lot more than they're making, especially in Amazon workhouses, or those who work in hospitals that are literally overfilling. Yeah, I just
Or
and
teachers, for example.
or what?
Teachers,
Oh, teachers. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah.
they're in like the lowest income bracket. It's very frustrating to me. We are a country that cares so much about our education, but we don't pay people to provide education. Well, that's why we have for-profit schools, I guess. So,
Well, that's, yeah, you have charter schools, but you also have, the military and police and authoritarian regimes getting, giant lump sums of like, investment, like they've taken away from healthcare and education. And then they have scabs and right to work states, which basically, is anti-labor and it's anti-unionizing and organizing efforts. So yeah, that in itself is one of the biggest systemic issues, for teachers, which is, I'm sorry if you're making what, like 40 to 50,000, sometimes 60, and if you're lucky, and they teach over, especially for elementary teachers that have to buy their own supplies. Like to me, that's just so asinine and just not the priorities there, but we got to give Teslas, to police officers. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, I can't remember which department it was. I don't know if it was New York or a different department, but they they just got new Teslas.
that's important because the environment, dude.
Yeah, it's not going to matter once you destroy the environment for the lithium anyway, but I mean, I guess it's slightly better than fossil fuels, but like, it's not gonna.
Well, it depends on where they get their energy, right? If their energy is created by fossil fuel sources, then it doesn't really matter at all.
I'm sorry, but they don't need to be driving fucking $100,000, $80,000 to $100,000 Teslas. That to me is just asinine.
They get new cars so often anyway.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Yeah, I completely disagree with
You know,
like
this is
that
weird,
notion.
like,
And Elon Musk, by the way, I just want to touch on this. He has also made an obscene amount of money. Not as much as Bezos, but he eclipsed
Elon's a good guy.
he eclipsed, yeah, really good guy. He eclipsed Bill Gates as the second richest person in the world. And then he's a giant union buster. They don't have any union representation.
Well, that's how they.
He even got taken to court. He's been taken to court over it too. And
I'm not gonna lie to you. If I were to, if when I graduate and if I can get a job at like SpaceX or something, I'm fucking doing it. Like, I'll do it. I mean,
go for it. Hey, if you want to work for fucking slave wages at fucking Tesla and get treated like shit, you can't even take like time off. Like, if you just like read some of the anecdotes, like from these workers, like it's really disgusting. Like he's made, I think, over $50 billion, like maybe north of 60, and he didn't give them hazard pay. He forced his workers to come in during the beginning of the pandemic and risk their lives when they didn't even want to. You know, and now he's talking about cutting costs as he's made over $40 billion. He wants to cut costs because I think it's because other manufacturers are getting into the game for electric vehicles. But it's like, dude, once they enter, like once you get like VW, like Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda, Subaru, a lot of Japanese and German car manufacturers are now starting to get into that. So once that becomes more affordable in the market, I'm not sure like what the future is going to hold for Tesla, to tell you the truth.
I think Tesla will remain
I think they're more of a sports car. They're not like a low sedan, family sedan,
I see them
base model type of company.
Car model. I consider them the Apple of the car industry. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I look. It's the brand, you know, someone said, I have an electric.
It's the aesthetic. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I have an electric car. Oh, is it a Tesla? You know, it's that type of thing. You know, when you think about it, and good for him for creating a business. For basically not creating that market, but really bringing that market kind of to the forefront. You know, and I get it, and I think it's a good thing, and I think it's good from a market perspective and from like a consumer perspective that now we're going to get a lot more alternatives to electric vehicles. But I think what we need to do is we need to reevaluate how our energy for those electric vehicles is produced, and I think that's kind of the next step.
Yeah, Toyota actually, you know, they've invested into solid state batteries and as well as hydrogen. So they've got like a lot of investing. Japan actually is going to be banning internal combustion engines. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Several developed countries have already started to do it. So
It would work well, for example.
My only issue I just want to say though is how this affects the working class. I don't want it to be like where everything's unaffordable. You know what I mean? And because internal combustion engines are still going to be around. A lot of people can't afford to just go fucking buy a Tesla or a brand new EV. You know what I mean? Even a Nissan Leaf is over 10 grand for brand new.
So, and the tax credit is great. Obama, that was a cool thing Obama implemented. It's a great way to kind of kickstart that industry, and it's a cool idea. It's when you have like those admission standards that you have to meet too.
Yeah,
that's kind of irritating. So like working class person or like a college student or whatever, you get an old car from your parents or a family member, and they give you an old car, and then you move for college to go to that college, and then it's like, oh hey, your car doesn't meet these admission standards. Now you have to spend all this extra money. It's like, what about me being in college says I have extra income for my car? Like that's not gonna happen. I don't, and that's irritating. I think for places like Japan, if they were to ban internal combustion engines, I think it could work well in specific areas due to their public transportation systems. I think they have a great public transit system.
they do.
So
They have bullet trains. Yeah.
Portland, Oregon, for example, it could work well because they have a great public transit. Seattle, Not so much.
No, dude, it's so antiquated here. Like,
It's shitty that
it's
they didn't think
you,
about how they were going to implement it. Like,
no.
oh, put buses in. Like, that's not how you should do it. I think the city of Seattle grew so quickly they didn't think about it, and that's where Portland came. We're like, hey, we should put like rails in because those guys up there didn't. Like again, Max came in and Portland Metro, the government within Portland, is its own weird thing, but it's done a great job with the public transit system there. So people from across Portland or even outside of Portland who live outside of Portland are able to still take a Max into Portland for like $6, a cup of coffee, basically. And I think that's a fantastic idea. It's just
My biggest thing is like, I don't want this to I don't support big oil, fuck them, first of all, but that doesn't mean like I don't enjoy driving, like my internal combustion engine. Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, like most people aren't going to be able to afford
no.
like for that market. It's going to take some time before that settles down. And in the meantime, like I think it was like a year or two ago, they were trying to get rid of like they rolled back on some of the emissions testing for like older vehicles, but at the same time they were also discussing like instead of like tax on gas, they were trying to do like tax like per mile you drive like your car. And to me it was just like so authoritarian and like an overreach. Like,
Right.
me driving per mile is none of your goddamn business. And if I'm driving like an EV or a hybrid, which I'm not, but I'm just saying hypothetically, if I was, if I could afford to do that, like, why would I? The whole point of getting an EV is to not have to rely on more taxation. Where's this gonna go? You know what I mean? Like, you're just gonna fucking pull a tax for no reason? Like, you need to at least elaborate. Like, fuck that. Like, you know what I mean?
This is de-incentivized behavior. It's the same thing with like cigarette tax. Is that they can tax cigarettes and price them really high, people aren't going to want to do it. But this is the difference. A cigarette is a luxury item. Your car is not a luxury item. You need it to get to work, to get to school, to go shopping, etc. You need it to support the economy. Smoking a cigarette does not really support the economy. And I think
no, except big tobacco. Yeah, it's exactly.
Yeah, it's the same thing with alcohol. Let's put a tax on alcohol. That's fine because me drinking alcohol is not really supporting the economy. Sure, it goes to that business, but like if you were to tax my regular car, my internal combustion engine car, my gas powered car, you're gonna tax me per mile I drive in it. It's like now my $15 an hour job. If I were to work at like, we'll say $15 an hour at Burger King, which no Burger King makes $15 an hour. But if that were to happen, and then now I have to pay extra tax on top of getting to work, now I'm not going to have any or as much money left to help stimulate the economy, to help go buy things, or maybe to buy a house. It's
right. And it affects people that are like displaced in rural areas. Like that's one of the biggest complaints working class people were, trying to talk to like this. I believe it was the Seattle City Council that was proposing it. And I'm like, the only like person on the Seattle City Council that reflects any like remote or like a lot of policies I like is Sawant, but like the rest of them are like so establishment and neoliberal. Like they're just out of touch. You know what I mean? Like even Sawant was like the only person I saw recently because they just across the spectrum raised the prices on like tab fees and registration. And she was the only one calling for like saying that, well, this affects, this screws over the working class. Because think about it, you could be rich and driving an older car that's reliable, or you could be poor and driving an expensive car. Well, how does that equitably translate? You know what I mean? It should depend on the year, right? And the maker, not across the board, just raise it. You know what I mean? Like that's where like there's like the intricacies of it. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't just be across the spectrum like that. Like another example is like good to go passes. Like I don't know if you
I don't know
You know
what
how much?
that is.
So like they have toll lanes here, and it's a crock of shit because it costs eight. Like I went accidentally went into one the other week, like 3 weeks ago. They charged me $8, and it flashed the light, like it beamed above it, like just quickly, and I went to the other lane because I didn't have a choice when I turned in from the bridge.
Hmm.
And like, I just don't understand, why would you take away fucking carpool lanes to implement toll bridges? You know what I mean? Like, I hope like the majority of the funding from those toll bridges is going back into the infrastructure, because I think it's a crock of shit that we already pay taxes for public roads. Why the fuck are we paying for toll bridges? And not just that, $8 for one use. That isn't even using it going there and back. That's $16 in one day to use a fucking toll lane. You know what I mean?
Well, and the bridges and shit in Seattle are just garbage. They're
That's
like,
regressive though to me, to just like tax like that for no reason. Like, it's not even a progressive tax.
no, it's just, hey, we're trying to raise funds to rebuild this. Oh, when are you gonna rebuild it? I don't know, like 40 years from now. Okay. Like last time I was in Seattle, which was a long ass time ago, many years ago, I looked up like the bridges and like the grades that they got. They all got like D passings, they like barely pass. I'm
Yeah.
like, what? We don't put any money into infrastructure. We really haven't built anything new since FDR. It's annoying, with all the richest country in the world, our roads used to be the envy of the world. The
Mhm.
German Autobahn was created out of the jealousy of the American highway system. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
well, we can't repair our highways because it costs too much. Well, how about we stop giving tax breaks to the wealthiest 1% and start putting the money back into our infrastructure? And that's
Yeah. Yeah. Like, we need a more equitable system that will actually put forth, addressing these infrastructure problems. And I mean, and I, like, I think Inslee has, um, for the most part, there's been a lot of policies I agree with, and he's better than Tim Eyman, or like, I can't remember the other candidate that was a Republican candidate that was running against him, but it's slipping my mind at the moment. But one of the things, like, I just don't understand is like I agree with, his promoting the environment measures, but why in the fuck do we have toll lanes to replace fucking carpool lanes? Isn't that more environmentally friendly to just stick with that than it is to fucking have a toll lane that most people can't afford to just use? You know what I mean? And
maybe
it's not even, I
how
don't know.
maybe that's how he's able to pass a lot of other stuff. And that's the thing about politics, is it's a lot of give and take.
Yeah.
That's the nuance of politics. There's a lot of give and take. And so, like, bringing it back to the COVID relief bill, like, there's a lot of shitty shit in the COVID relief bill that has nothing to do with COVID.
Yeah, I
However,
want to, sorry, go ahead.
you get $600, maybe 2,000 later, and it's shitty, but that's politics. I mean, it's really bad that these other countries are getting a lot of our tax money, and we're not getting a lot of it. But hopefully someday we'll get something for it. I don't know.
One thing I want to bring up is, like, if we didn't live in a duopoly, and we had like an actual socialist and, labor party. So we've never had that here. Like, the only real labor movement I think we've had is probably the Industrial Revolution. And since FDR, we haven't really had a president that caters to the working class or union organizers. Every fucking person, it seems like, in the last, at least since in our lifetimes, both yours and mine, most of these executives, former lobbyists, former trader insiders, that have corporate ties, have always been like ahead of really important, like, positions, like, say, the transition team that Biden has had. I haven't seen one actual lefty, I haven't seen him actually pay back the progressives, the left, that helped get him voted. You know, like Ilhan Omar, for example, in Minnesota, basically worked her ass off on the ground organizing, trying to, you know, and help him get elected. That's just one example. But Rashida Tlaib in Michigan did the same thing. And I haven't seen, like, if you look at it, I mean, down the board, across the spectrum, it's so many candidates that, like, don't have any left economic agenda. Most of them are just, you know, use austerity. They're just deficit hawks, or, you know what I mean? They're neoliberal.
I think
Yeah,
give it
go ahead.
time. Politics, change in politics and change in society is very slow. It's very incremental, and I think if we've seen it, Trump is a really good example of a check on neoliberalism. It's fair, you know. A lot of it, I don't agree with a lot of stuff on Trump, but he did do a lot for working people. Believe it or not, you know. But, well, he gave like a lot of tax breaks to like billionaires. Yeah, he had to in order to try to help other people. That's the nature of politics. And so, you know, you get someone like Joe Biden in there who's been in politics, and this is a great argument by the conservative movement, the conservative politics, is Biden has been an establishment politician for like 40 years. You know, and he hasn't done anything for working class people. And that's a fair argument, you know. And so when I hear a lot of people who are conservative or Trump supporters that he threw a wrench into politics, he really kind of turned it upside down. Yeah, I mean, you're right, he did, you know. And I get why he did not want to sign the coronavirus relief package. $600 a month is not fair. You know, he wants $2,000 a month, and he's sick of all this wasteful spending going to all these other countries and all this other crap. And I give him
it was actually one time, but I still agreed with him. You know?
I agree with him on that too, and I don't think it's fair for CNN and MSNBC to say Trump didn't sign it. Like, I was watching MSNBC the other day, and like, or when they revealed the COVID relief bill, they go, Trump doesn't like it and he's not signing it, and that's all they said. And I'm like, that is
that's disingenuous. Yeah,
that's not at all what happened.
That's not good faith.
Like, yeah, it for this and this and this and this and this. You can't just say Trump didn't do it and that's all. That's all they said. And I'm like, this is why people don't trust media, is because they don't say what the president's saying. They don't reflect on it. They say, oh, he doesn't like it, so he's not going to sign it. And it's like, that's not. He doesn't like it because it's giving hundreds of millions of our taxpayer dollars to foreign countries. It's giving Americans $600 when other countries get 500 million. Like, that's not fair. We're paying the taxes. We're the working class people. We are paying our taxes. And, you know, people go, well, you know, $2,000 is a lot of money. I don't know if the government can do it. You mean we as taxpayers? I don't know if we as taxpayers can do it, because the government is about people.
No, it's okay for corporations and, you know, especially banks and millionaires and billionaires to basically loot the treasury with, like, you know, especially with like loans that the Fed basically buys back. They buy back a lot of these like these bank loans. Like, it's really like insidious, but you don't hear a lot about it unless like you're an economist, like, and you have a background like, you know, in the private sector versus like federal funding. Like, I mean, it's pretty intricate, but it's also very, very corrupt. Like, you really don't, and you won't hear a lot of that material being you know, vocally stated by mainstream.
President Trump, he's got good arguments. When during the debate with Biden and they brought up $750 taxes, all he paid, and like, how could you do that? Blah 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 blah. His argument was like, Joe Biden and other politicians created that tax code. I took advantage of it. I'm sorry, but they created the tax code. Why would I pay more if I didn't have to? They created it.
I mean, I will say, like, I completely disagreed with like Trump's 2017 tax bill. I mean, that's part of the reason, like, why Amazon doesn't pay in taxes,
right?
You know, especially Bezos. And that's one thing, you know, like, I have a lot of issues with Trump's policies, But the Democrats don't even focus on that. Like they don't focus on policies because they're so accustomed to the neoliberal status quo. You know what I mean? They see everything at a surface level. Like it's really shallow. And that's the one thing like I hate about like a lot of the political discourse is like no one actually like dives into these issues of like why we have
No.
vast amounts of inequity, you know what I mean, and inequality. Like you just um it really is. It's like they just pin each other of like the working class against each other instead of standing in solidarity. And that's why you see like a lot of intersectionality on like the Democrats' part, right? They try to erase economic policies with identity politics up until this point with like the stimulus, like everything they've run on their platform. If they're, you know, they go on gender and race rather than actual economic policy that would help,
Right.
you know, across the spectrum. And that's why I don't like that they've hijacked those issues, because they don't actually have to implement anything that would materially improve their lives, you know. And you know, like we know who the Republicans are, you know, we know who they're bought out by, but that's my biggest, you know, issue with the establishment in the Democratic Party. Like ever since Bill Clinton, you know, took over in the 90s post Reagan, you know, like many people have said, Bill Clinton is Ronald Reagan's biggest achievement because of what he did to the Overton window and shifting the narratives in this country. You know, they said, oh, everything was hunky dory. Oh, everything's great in the 90s, you know, and it's like, what bubble are you living in? You know what I mean? Like they didn't materially look at it objectively because they developed Washington brain. That's what
Yeah.
a lot of people coin it, but it's true.
What I think politicians should do, I think they should wear NASCAR jackets that have all their sponsors on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they should do. I think that would be really cool.
Absolutely.
That way
I
we
agree.
don't have to,
Or wear body cameras.
right. That way, you know, they don't have to pretend, you know, this or that, you know. When you're a public servant, you're supposed to be, I mean, what you learn in school, what I'm learning in school about public administration, public affairs, is when you're a public servant, you need to be transparent, you need to be honest, and you need to communicate. People, you know, in Washington are doing that. I don't see, you know, when they pass a bill or when they're meeting, this COVID relief bill is a great example. They hid behind closed doors and created it and then gave it to everybody to read it 4 hours before they vote. I'm like, that is not what democracy is supposed to be. That is not what a republic is supposed to be. You're supposed to be transparent and communicate these things. You can't just meet behind closed doors like it's a private business and then give it to people right before you vote. That's not cool. You know, that's really shitty by Pelosi and Mnuchin. Basically, you know,
McConnell.
the dynasty.
Yeah, one thing that, yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, I definitely think discourse there needs to be more accountability, period. That's one thing I actually like about Twitter as a platform is that, you know, you have all these candidates that are public servants and you just see them just basically getting, well, I mean, like they need to be held accountable, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know, like verbal attacks, if you want to call them that. I'm like, I think it's more of accountability. You're just saying it's an attack because you're trying to defend the politician.
You're on the receiving end of it, that's why.
Exactly. Like you want to call it an attack, but I mean, is backtracking on policies you promised, is that really an attack? I don't think so.
I would argue, you know, most people, I don't know, I don't have the Twitters, but I think like a lot of people on Twitter, when they're reacting to a politician, they're reacting to the policy, not the politician. And I think that's something that a lot of the media misrepresents, is they're reacting
the
to
Bernie Bro narrative. You mean the Bernie Bro narrative? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, they're not attacking the person's character. They're not attacking the person or their personal life. They're saying, hey, this is a shitty policy. For example, when Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham said we can't vote on Merrick Garland because it's too close to an election year, You can hold me to that. You can hold me to that. Okay, we hold you to that. Oh well, just kidding. We don't care now because
You said something mean to Trump, so I take
yeah,
it
we
back.
don't have to do that. And it's like, no, you said this. You said we could hold you accountable, and now we're trying to, and you're blatantly ignoring. You're being a hypocrite. That is not cool, man. That's fucked up. And I, you know, the older I get, the more I understand. The more I feel like Squidward from SpongeBob. You know, I just all politicians are corrupt. I get it now. You know, like they.
Yeah, I've become more radicalized to the left, even like post Bernie. You know, I mean, Bernie really, I think, deserves a lot of credit for his political movement. But even, you know, I was even disappointed, you know, with a lot of his campaign tactics.
Yep.
But I don't think it was only, I don't think it was solely him why he lost. I definitely think that, you know, Obama in the background colluding, pulling strings for Biden.
When you're a
That's something to do with
president,
that.
you have nothing to say. You know,
I don't understand. Yeah, that to me, like this whole resurgence of like the infatuation with Obama, I really find it like this is what's wrong with politics. This is what's wrong is because people take it at the surface level, and they treat them like fucking celebrities instead of holding them accountable. And you know, look, I get it. Like I'm a fan of like a lot of these Justice Democrats in Congress, but if they do something I don't agree with, I'm going to hold them accountable. That doesn't make me any less of a, you know, a person because of that. I just think that's absurd.
well, what it is I think that you know when they look back at Obama or Bush or whatever, I think they just ate too many member berries. You know,
Pretty
that
much.
they member berries, and that's all that's it. They don't think about how Obama backed down to the pharmaceutical industry with Obamacare. That's what I mean. It's Obamacare is better than nothing, and I will give him a lot of credit. You know, politics. I understand that's an incredibly difficult thing to pass, and it's helped a lot of people. And I'm not saying but by forcing people to buy into the individual mandate, that's a shitty thing, and that's you. That's the pharmaceutical company telling you what to do.
The only thing I liked from Obamacare was the pre-existing conditions, but outside of that, all it was a rehashed version of Romney Care, which was drafted by a right-wing think tank in the 80s.
Yeah,
That's all Obamacare was. And I just disagree with the sentiment that a lot of people, especially like the blue wave Democrats, I like to call them on Twitter, you know, the armchair politicians who don't think objectively. Sorry, you know, at least that's what they consider themselves. Like they're not objective. Like they don't understand that like even prior to Obamacare, like premiums were actually lower,
yep.
believe it or not, and that it actually worsened a lot of people's life. Like yes, it saved lives, and I'll give Obamacare credit for that, you know, with the pre-existing conditions. But I didn't agree with the mandate. You know, a lot of people can't afford health insurance. That's part of the whole principle of why healthcare shouldn't be privatized in the first place, with the profit incentive, you know, like basically the middlemen insurance companies profiteering off of premiums, copays, and deductibles. Like that's part of the rotten system of the healthcare system we have here. And a lot of countries, what's interesting is like post World War II, I believe that's when like a lot of Europe started to have universal healthcare. We talked about it here for like decades. FDR, JFK, Lyndon Johnson. It never came to be in fruition, but it's not even a radical idea. Like we've talked about this before. You and I were fucking born.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not even radical. Like the only thing it's radical for is why? Because insurance executives and shareholders won't make fucking money off of dying people and sick people. Like,
Well, it's helped create a very wealthy country, a
Medicare.
wealthy 1%, you know, and that's, you know, it's the whole, it's that whole inherited wealth shit that, you know, it's just, you know, if you're, you know, you own a pharma company now and you're like a bajillionaire now, you probably didn't create that on your own or created that from the ground up. You know, your dad probably gave you a small loan of $1 million, or you had an inheritance from the Rockefeller or so, you know what I mean?
Right. Big
Railroad
oil company.
inheritance, or you know, an old mining company. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
the same families controlling everything. It's that oligarchy, you know. Only a handful of families actually control everything. Like the Koch brothers, like their brand is like 80% of like all stuff you're gonna find in stores.
The one Koch brother now.
But
But
yeah,
yeah.
right. But you know, the illusion of choice, you know, oh, do you want Pepsi or Coke? It's the same. It's owned by the same company. It's ultimately owned, you know, by the same people. It doesn't matter, you
Well,
know.
yeah, the whole market is dominated by both Coke and Pepsi. They own other shares of other fucking
Well, that's what I'm
products.
saying. You know,
Yeah,
Nestle are
but
just, you know, it's do you want
right,
Aquafina or do you want Dasani? Oh, isn't it owned by the same people? Well, yeah, basically, but which one do you want? Well, you know,
right. I want to. I don't know how long we've been going on for. We could probably edit some of this content out after the fact, but I just kind of wanted to like wrap this up just with this article, you know, by David Sirota. But one of the issues, I just wanted to like, I mean, unless you want to bring anything else up,
no, go ahead.
is just how like the only senators, the Democratic senators, I don't know if I could share my screen. Can I share it real quick?
Yeah, let me stop my share and I'll let you share. There you go, boss.
Thank you. Oh, nope. Host disabled participant screen share.
Cool.
I'll just, it's fine. I'll just bring it up.
I got you. Hang on. Allow multi-pin. Nope. Oh God.
Just click on the link I sent in the chat.
Is it the daily poster?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
If you want to go like towards the middle of it,
All right, hang
I
on.
just thought this was interesting.
I will do that. Let me bring up my browser window. All right, let me go back into Zoom. Let me go back into screen sharing.
Go to the liberal pundits segment or the paragraph. Just a little bit down.
Keep going. Just tell me when.
Right there.
Oh, I see her here.
Perfect. So, yeah, I'm not because I haven't been. We should probably have a time checker, honestly, or
We'll be
like.
going for like an hour, but I can edit a lot of shit out.
Oh, okay, cool. I was gonna say, you know, one thing that's like really disturbed me, like about like the $2,000, you know, the framing of advocating for these survival checks, is the fact that a lot of people think like they've used terminology like overheating of the economy, and these are like Washington Post contributors that are basically executives and have a shitload of wealth and influence, and it's like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like we haven't had one stimulus for like 7-8 months, and to a one-time $2,000 payment to me is minuscule when you look at, if you look at Canada, right? Canada has had over $2,000, like around $2,000 a month, $2,000 a month to keep people and businesses afloat that, you know, don't have work. And then if you look at the pandemic response, say, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was Norway or Iceland, but they had, at least in Western Europe, they've had a lot of wages for workers covered. 65 to 85% of wages were covered. And people that, you know, didn't have a job still had economic relief, you know, and I think it was Norway. I don't quote me on the exact country. I think it was either Norway or Iceland, but they had 90% of wages like covered by, you know, the federal government. And you know, it's not radical at all, you know, especially when you look at the response by other countries. You know, $2,000 a month, and this is what people should be getting in back pay. you know, call me a socialist, but yeah, I think we should have been demanding $3,000 checks, and then that would have shifted the narrative probably down to two, and then we could have had retroactive payments. But instead, what we got was Nancy Pelosi basically flopping on not reaching a deal with, because what she should have done, in my opinion, was try to accept that deal by Mnuchin, put the ball in McConnell's court, and then make him look like the bad guy, because he wanted shield immunity. And basically, in this article, like, he talks about, David Sirota states how like, Democrats are willing to use their power to pass $2,000 checks, and I'll give them credit for that. The House did pass that standalone bill, right? That provision.
Mhm.
But what pisses me off is Schumer, and even, like, there's been absolute silence from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as VP, and Chuck Schumer. The one leverage, like, Bernie was using was that veto bill on the military defense bill, and to not bring that to a table vote until this was. Well, Chuck Schumer and a lot of these Democrats caved, voted on that, and now, after the fact, are trying to promote the $2,000 checks. Well, guess what? Now you have no leverage, and now Mitch McConnell isn't going to bring that to the table because you fucking don't know how to fucking play politics and wield your power. Like, to me, like, that was such a big blunder, and this is what a lot of people online have been talking about. And I agree. Like, how do you bring this to a vote literally today, and then think that you're going to have power now? Like, the one thing Bernie was doing and using his leverage by using the filibuster, and then basically Chuck Schumer and all these other Democrats voted for it and brought it to a vote. To me, I don't know what your response is, but I don't know. To me, it felt very either naive or inept or both, by the Democratic leadership.
My response would be pretty cynical. It's kind of shitty, but what you're saying makes a lot of good points, but I think you're missing one key aspect. Left wing or right wing, it's all part of the same bird. They're the same party. Sure, they're not very good at playing politics or whatever, but it's like, it doesn't really hurt them if they vote that way or this way, or if they don't use their power this way or that way. It doesn't hurt them at all. It hurts us. But
That's why these dinosaurs need to just fucking be replaced, dude.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt them. They're friends outside of them arguing with each other. Don't let them think that they're not. Don't let them tell you that they're not. McConnell and Pelosi are good buddies. I guarantee you they are.
Well, yeah, you could also see the video of Kamala Harris and Lindsey Graham, like, giving each other like an elbow, like a handshake, like, gesture. Yeah. And I'm just like, if you really consider yourself an opposition party, maybe you shouldn't be catering and in cahoots with your other opposing party.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you can come together on certain policies like Holly and Bernie did, because Holly was a Republican who actually worked with Bernie behind the scenes to try to get this to the table. Originally, there wasn't even going to be a fucking stimulus check. Nope. Until Bernie and Holly brought this to a fucking, to the table. And, I try not to have, like, a cynical outlook, but man, like, it is so hard, like, it really does just make you feel like there really is, like, a lot of nihilism in politics. It does make you very cynical, like, when you pay attention to a lot of this. But it's like, to me, I don't know, I feel like you gotta have a fucking backbone, man. Like, you gotta be stern. Like, I've heard arguments of, like, people saying, oh, we shouldn't bring Medicare for all for a vote because it could hurt, like, the progressive and left wing. How the fuck can it hurt when we're in the middle of a pandemic and people need healthcare more than they've ever needed. Like, to me, like, I get what you're saying, like from a committee standpoint, but we don't even have like that power. Like, how does that damaging to bring it to a vote? I'm not even going to call it a symbolic gesture. I really think if you can't pass it in the middle of a fucking pandemic, then when is it going to be passed? Like, when is a good time? I haven't heard one good answer, at all from people. Like, I honestly want to hear this discussion from other people. Is like, if we don't have nationalized healthcare or universal healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, like Martin Luther King Jr. said that, like when, like bringing policies up, is there ever a good time to do the right thing?
No, because they
You know what I
don't
mean?
do it.
Is there ever a bad time? Like, that was the sentiment of of his quote. Like, to me, it's just, and that just still sticks with me, is like, okay, well, if it's not in the middle of a pandemic, then when should we bring it to a discussion and up for a vote in Congress, in the House and the Senate? And that's the one thing that just really irked me about Biden. But I'll digress from that. But yeah, that just one thing that really irked me.
I don't know. It's
Saying that he would veto it. Sorry, to add context to that.
yeah, I don't. It's been an interesting year. That's what I'll say. 2020 has been a weird year for politics. It's been a weird year for everything. I don't think the COVID relief bill goes far enough, but
Not even.
it is better than nothing, is how I'm going to look at it. It is better than nothing. It's shitty to say, but that's the truth in it. It's better than not having anything at all. And we were on the verge of not having anything at all,
With the government shutdown, yeah.
But we have a bill now, and a lot of other people are talking about more stuff. And I'll give Trump credit too, where he's almost vetoed it because he wanted more money for people, and I'm fine with that,
Yeah, when I see Amy Klobuchar, like, she went on, like, I think it was CNN or MSNBC, and she stated how, like, this is like against the American people, and that's really perplexing. How the fuck can this be against American people when they want a bigger stimulus check? Are you kidding me? Like, how tone deaf? Because Trump said that, like, that doesn't make sense. Like, if he's right on an issue, the very few times he is, but if he is, you have to give him credit for that.
I
Like,
think what politicians should do is I think they should practice kayfabe, like wrestlers used to do. When they were a bad guy, bad guys and good guys in wrestling weren't allowed to like associate with each other outside. I think politicians should practice some kayfabe. If they want us to be against each other, maybe they should be against each other too. At least in the public eye. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
I agree, because that's where things like become kind of, like, if I get really sick to my stomach when I see people that they're, calling George Bush, who's a war criminal and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis. They're trying to cozy up to him and say, "Oh, but look how great and aesthetically pleasing this picture is that he painted.
sure.
Oh, look how good this looks." How is that relevant to his, disastrous policies and his foreign policy that affected millions of people? You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's dangerous to, like, to undermine or to disregard, you know what I mean? Like, the things that they've done. Like, treat them like you would in a debate. You know what I mean? Like, this is a debate club. It's just because it really just reinforces that sentiment. Like, yeah, it's people are cynical because really it's class warfare. It's all the same bullshit when you get people that get elected into Washington, into Congress. It doesn't materially improve their lives. They run on bullshit platitudes. Like, I'm so sick of hearing "Healing of the Nation" by Joe Biden. I have to say that. Like, yes, I get the sentiment, healing the soul of our nation. Sure, that's great, but can you specify a policy you're going to elaborate and do, please? Just why don't you say, hey, let's focus on the Georgia runoff race, because that's pretty integral to passing any legislation or agenda. You know what I mean? And Biden has even said he would pass a better stimulus. Well, that's great. Then why don't you say that and run off of that? Why are you just running off of rhetoric? You know what I mean?
Because president after president after president have run off rhetoric. That's what they've done. Obama did the same thing. You know, he ran off rhetoric, and then when he got in, he did something completely different. Bush, same thing. Trump, same thing.
I think Obama,
People,
yeah, I have to say this. Obama made so many more people, I think, cynical, like of the political system we live in. Just because like he ran on a more populist platform than he actually was. Then he sold out the working class as soon as he had Citibank appoint his fucking entire cabinet, pretty much. So I think, you know, that pretty much turned a lot of people off and made them, you know, more individualistic and just cynical of like the political
that's
system.
exactly how the Republican
So
Party was able to take the Senate and the House back.
well, the Tea Party too. It was like they had a certain agenda. They were relentless and they took over the Republican Party.
They did a really good job. They knew what they wanted and how to get it.
The difference is, though, for the left, it is a lot more challenging for progressives to take over the Democratic Party with the disparity of wealth. The Tea Party had a lot more fundraising and they had a lot more money. You know what I mean? Like we do have some influence and some fundraising capabilities with AOC, but I mean, the Tea Party had that the entire time. You know what I mean? Like that. I think when people compare it to that, it's like, yeah, like that's the goal, right? To take like a left Tea Party stance. But you have to keep in mind they had a lot more fucking funding backing them.
A lot of it too is the Republican Party as a whole does a much better job of coalition building than the Democrats. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. The Republican Party is way better at opening their doors to new voters and new politicians and new ideas that, you know, work within their conservative worldview. The Democrats, establishment Democratic Party, isn't so good at doing that. They're not so good at opening up the party and changing because it's run by dinosaurs, you know?
Right.
That's really what it comes down to. That's why you get people like AOC, you know, that don't really go anywhere because the powers that be don't want them to, you know, because she beat Joe Crowley. She beat this establishment that was going to be the next speaker, you know? I mean, that's why. Yeah. It's a weird, like, revenge thing that they have. Like, oh, you beat my buddy. Now I'm not going to let you work and do anything and do any committees. And it's like, cool. What are we in high school? Like, dude.
I know. It feels like a fucking popularity contest. Like
Mean Girls. Feels like the
you know, yeah, like I'm sorry, but I agree like completely with like, you know, AOC and the squad when they're non-committal on voting for Pelosi as Speak House. You know, like I'm not inclined. I don't want a neoliberal dinosaur shill to retain their power as Speaker of the House. I'm sorry. I agree with them. You know, people think that, oh, this is what kills me. So you have a lot of blue wave Democrats, I like to call them. They run on this rhetoric of, oh, Bernie is he's not unifying the party. Oh, progressives and leftists, there's no unity, like when you call them out on like policy issues. But then as soon as you reciprocate that, like they call you toxic, and then they use the Bernie bro narrative, you know? Like I remember people are still pissed today when Bernie Sanders supporters used a snake emoji on Twitter.
Yeah.
And like it's been a whole thing, and like people like said that like, that was misogynistic, which had no relevance or bearing like at all on her gender. And it was like so backwards. It was just calling her out on how much of a fake progressive she was. Like, and what's funny is I haven't heard a single thing from Warren on this $2,000 checks. Here in the article, it mentions voting against McConnell's key procedural motions to and rank and file House Democrats who are willing to use their power to pass the $2,000 checks. But like, honestly, like I haven't seen anything from Kamala Harris, and I haven't seen anything from Elizabeth Warren. Like, there's been very few people that have been on like the working class side, of pushing policies, especially in the Senate, and well, I mean both branches, but yeah, I just wanted to add that tidbit because I don't think that will ever not be funny. Seeing a snake emoji, just like the Pete Buttigieg rat.
Oh God, yeah.
The whole rat meme.
I hope
Call me petty, but
the Biden administration takes over, and we'll get a better stimulus that actually does stimulate. It doesn't just give money to other people that don't really need it. I hope it actually does something. And that's what I'm kind of sick of, federal government politics. That's why I care a lot more about state politics. We're more intrigued in local politics. Is you can actually get stuff done. You can do things. You can actually, care and actually impact some type of change. Federally, it's just like you don't really. Too bad.
Well, that's one thing that really irks me about this whole throwing a coup, right? That undermines state legislation and state constitutions of what Trump's trying to do. Even though like each of his lawsuits have flopped and failed of trying to overturn the election results. That's one thing that's really like, because I mean, you are essentially undermining and threatening state constitutions by doing what he's doing. And I find that serious. And I see Democrats like scoffing at that. Oh, let him throw a coup. Oh, let him. And it's like, I don't know, man. I think their priorities and their reactions by a lot of people that like, watch MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, like, I don't know. I just really think a lot of they're reactionary. You know what I mean? They don't look at things beyond a surface level, I guess would be my main point.
Well, they don't on purpose, because if they go into it on the surface or more than the surface level, then people will think for themselves.
I can't have that.
Exactly.
Common sense isn't so common.
We're told what to think, not how to think. And that's kind of the thing. It's shitty. But it's kind of how it is. Just shut up, go shop at Walmart and Amazon, and just go to work. We don't don't do anything. It's what they want. And it's oh, but you gotta go.
If you don't like it, you can get out.
But though, and it's like, well, okay, does it matter? And that's shitty, because I locally and state, yes, federally, probably not. And it's shitty to say, and people always give me the argument, what's the point? It doesn't really matter. And it's hard for me to like argue that it does federally, like if you're, it sucks. And I don't know. It's just, sometimes I get real cynical about it. And, other times I'm just like, oh no, everything will be fine. It's just, I don't know.
To me, it just, it stems, like I said, like if we actually had multiple parties, like you'd have your moderate Democrats, centrists, moderate Republicans, you'd have like the far right, and then you'd have like a socialist Labor Party, which is where I would be more inclined of most of my views. Like we don't have representation here. There really isn't a lot of elected officials who represent anything other than Wall Street donors. Like Obama's entire cabinet, like I said, I don't know if I say this before, but yeah, his entire cabinet was appointed by Citibank, right after he ran off of representing the working class and populist ideas.
Well,
You know?
Trump drained the swamp.
Yeah, exactly. And
But
yeah, don't worry, Biden will do the same thing, except it'll be different.
didn't he have
Lobbyists.
a BP oil exec or something to be EPHE for some shit? Wasn't that what he did?
Yeah. Well, you also want to know what else is ironic is that Kamala Harris could have actually prosecuted Steve Mnuchin, who wouldn't even probably be in Trump's administration right now. But she
Really?
did. But she didn't, as a public prosecutor of California. Yeah, you can look that shit up. It's so amazing, like how intertwined so many of these insiders and like
Well, she
and
did on
politicians.
purpose because now she's VP. That was why. That was probably the deal. Like, if you don't do this, it might be in your favor. If you don't. You never know.
I think she was just paid off by him. Obviously she received something,
Who
but
knows? Who
who
knows?
knows? I couldn't state,
It's
I don't want to.
all depends on who do you want to piss off. That's really what it comes down to.
Right. But it's just like, it's different Wall Street lackeys, insider traders. But one of my biggest points I wanted to make is, like if we would have had Bernie in or like a real lefty, you can have people with academics, like an academic background or a union organizing background. You don't have to have insider traders. You don't have to have Wall Street backgrounds, lobbyists, shareholders, executives.
You don't?
I know, right? It's a radical concept, but I find it funny because I've seen so many people that are like, we'll give Biden a chance. Just give him a chance. I voted for him. He hasn't even been in office yet. And I begrudgingly voted for him. Like, I mean, I have like some regrets, but I still think it was a better choice than Trump. But, like you either have, like fascism, alt-right, or you have a neoliberal corporatist. They're both shitty. Like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? You know what I mean? Like, I really felt like I didn't want to take the risk of, like, I've voted for the Green Party before, and I might vote for him again next election term. I don't know what's going to happen in 2024, but I can certainly say that I'm incredibly disappointed, with this transition team, because I would like to see at least one lefty, one progressive candidate in his administration. I haven't seen anything, not one.
Well,
I mean, not one.
There was rumors that Sanders was going to be his
was it Secretary of Labor?
Secretary of Labor.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
That's what I said. Like, I would love that, and that would be a great way for Biden to kind of get the left, kind of on its side and whatever. But I doubt it because how the corporate interests. Wall Street doesn't like Sanders. I mean, billionaires can't buy Bernie. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and that's or at least those billionaires will say it's shitty because it's not going to happen. But we'll get Elizabeth Warren instead.
Yeah, and we won't even get that.
No, because she went against the banks and against Zuckerberg and all this other crap.
Yeah, like I'm not like a Warren fan. She definitely, she really discredited herself and dug her own grave by how she treated Bernie by not endorsing him and then doing the same thing in 2020 that she did in 2016.
Yeah.
I'm not going to feel bad because it reinforced the Bernie bro toxic narrative, which was fabricated and had nothing. First of all, it wasn't even true. And second of all, even if it was, that literally detracts and has no relevance to Bernie's agenda or who Bernie is.
It's a slight towards people who support Sanders. It has nothing to do with policy. It's just a way
to
anger a certain portion of the electorate.
Yeah, it's framing. And the mainstream media enforce this.
Yeah, because they knew if they did, then Bernie could lose if they continually force this thing.
Yeah. who is it? Joanne Reed had what she called a body language expert to critique Bernie, and it was such an embarrassment and a shit show on MSNBC that anyone else who did that should have been fired. But because she has a lot of wealth and influence, especially in mainstream media and the establishment, nothing came about of it. She got called out on it on Twitter, but it's these people, it didn't come in fruition, like nothing mattered. But yeah, I'm certainly not going to feel bad for Warren because she just dug her own grave. And the ironic part is, if she actually ran in 2015 when Bernie asked her to, I mean, we could be looking at a whole different landscape. You know what I mean? I mean, like, exactly. But it's just weird in hindsight to think about that. But of course, that's not what happened. So, yeah, Elizabeth Warren, hey, even if she was in Biden's administration, sure, I would give him some credit, but he won't even do that. And she made herself look like a fool because she even asked, multiple times to be in his administration and, to team up. And Biden said no. Yeah. And then she had no leverage. And then she just went on with smears against Bernie. So
yep.
I'm not going to feel bad for her, like, at all. Like, the one thing I liked that she did, was Dodd-Frank.
Yeah.
The bank regulations. I thought that was a good piece of legislation, but she's kind of like a wonky technocrat and not really left or progressive. She's, pretty moderate in most of the sense, but I think she would have been better than Biden.
I think so too. Biden doesn't know
for certain.
Doesn't know where he is.
Yeah, exactly. I honestly think, like, and I don't think this gets talked about at all, is Kamala Harris is probably going to be doing a lot of Biden's day-to-day activities. Like, I am really curious to see, like, you know what I mean? It just feels like the power dynamic with Dick Cheney and Bush. It really feels like Kamala Harris might pull the strings in a lot of, we'll see, obviously, in due time. Time will tell, but that's one thing I'm really curious about. You know what I mean? Is what, like, the first 20 days is, what are Biden's policies going to be? I think that's going to say a lot. You know what I mean? I think, maybe the first 90 days, give or take, and then outside of that, he may do nothing at all, or he may continue on that same trajectory. But I think that's really going to tell, what it's going to look like.
I think that's a good way to look at it, and see what his administration is actually going to do. The first 100 days in office are kind of like the most important for any new administration to really sell the American people on what they're doing. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see. I will say one thing, though, is studying public affairs and political science during the Trump years has been really entertaining, and it's been very interesting, and you learn a lot, because if it was like the Obama years or the Biden years, it's politics is boring sometimes, and I think I give a lot of credit to Trump, at least making it fun. It's
at least have something to laugh at.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, like Trevor Noah had a lot of good stuff. Sassy Justice, the South Park creators had a lot of stuff. Our cartoon president, Colbert show, Saturday Night Live. At least it was fun, And then I'll give them that, Like, it's hard to make fun of Obama. It's hard to make fun of Biden as much. It's just, at least,
except for him forgetting where he's at and how senile sometimes.
Least Trump made it. At least Trump made it accessible to everybody, and I'll give him a lot of credit on that. He made politics seem accessible to everybody, regardless of your socioeconomic class, and I give him a lot of credit on that.
Yeah, I think, Biden, I think he's a lot more memeable than Obama. Yeah. But I think Trump is probably the most memeable since Bush, in the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We'll see what happens, in the first 100 days. I don't know. I'm hoping we get another stimulus package, like a real one that actually helps us people.
Yeah, I think people need at least $2,000 or more a month to survive off of and pay bills because of how much the economic turmoil we're facing in several countries, or it's not countries, God, in several states. Um, you know, I just I think people should at least be getting north of $500 a week. Not 300.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Especially.
I agree. And a lot of it too is they go, well, if you're on unemployment, you should be fine. It's like, well, not everybody can be on unemployment.
Not everyone can get a stimulus check either.
Not everybody can get a stimulus check either. And so, oh, why don't you go to work? Not every place is hiring, and that's another thing. They go, why don't you get a job? Like, no one's hiring because everything's shut down. That's what they're not understanding. Like I can't just go work for any place because a lot of places are shut down.
Yeah, even a lot of grocery stores, may not be hiring in small businesses around. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I agree. And plus, what's really going to be interesting is going to see how, like for universal basic income, like there's been a growing amount of support for that with like automation growing. And I'm not a big Yang fan, but like, because I'm not certain how like UBI will affect the social safety net, if it, may harm more people that depend on it. But I do agree, like I'm inclined to agree that we do need universal basic income, especially with, the bottom line for shareholders being more important than workers. And they're just gonna, they've sought for automation for years. You know what I mean? It's not something new. It's actually something that's been proposed for several decades, even since like the 50s and 60s. They've talked about this. So in like certain industries, especially for like fast food and like truck driving, this isn't a new idea. So not that, who knows with automation, like in terms of driving, but in the private sector, there's been a lot of talk about it. So I think that's one important issue that should be talked about. And I'll give Yang that credit. At least that's, being brought forth on the table now. Even if I'm skeptical of that, I think this pandemic has definitely shown that people need it, especially with the wealth inequality. And plus it would stimulate the economy anyway, just like raising the minimum wage would.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Biden does, in his first 100 days. He still doesn't have his cabinet picks yet. So, who knows? It's coming up soon. So we'll have to see what happens. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just have to pay attention to the Georgia runoff races.
Yeah, we'll see.
Until then, I think it's the next biggest thing. Unless, Trump starts a war with Iran. Who knows what's next in the next coming weeks. But
I think the Georgia runoff is the most important thing right now. I mean, not the most important thing, obviously, COVID bill, things like that. But when it comes to politics, like election, I think that the Georgia runoffs will make or break the Senate. That's really what it comes down to. And that's...
So I am curious if it's a split, does Kamala Harris break that tiebreaker? If it's like
Vice President breaks the tie with a vote. Pence
but what if only one of the two Democrats win? Like say it's only Ossoff that wins against, what is it, Purdue?
Yeah.
But what if the other race goes towards the Republican? It's still going to be a Republican majority at that point, right? Like we need
for a Republican to switch over, but it's highly unlikely due to polarized in its party over country type of mentality now. You can't anger McConnell, because if you piss off McConnell, then you're screwed. You're not, it's...
that's one thing I think that hasn't been, I mean, I've seen it on Twitter, but like, why does one senator from Kentucky hold that much power to instantaneously kill any piece of legislation, any bill that's passed in the House, I mean, he can just kill anything, any progressive measure, and he's already packed the courts. I still haven't heard anything recently on on packing the Supreme Court. I mean, I think, I don't want to see a far right court, in the next several decades. You know what I mean? Because that honestly could undermine, even if there is progressive legislation passed. That's that's what's most fraught, is like that could literally just undermine it and set us back. So, I'd like to actually see, Kamala Harris or Biden mention, or at least elaborate on what they plan to do. But
I don't think the court will jeopardize much in terms of policy of legislation. That is not their job. And we've seen that with the Affordable Care Act. Trump has tried, and the Republicans have tried repeatedly to try to get the Supreme Court to do anything about it, and they're like, no. And I think the court knows this, and I think Chief Justice Roberts knows this. The court is really protective of their image and of their power. Law and court rulings only work if the majority of people will abide by it. And if they just all of a sudden start switching it up, saying, oh yeah, we'll overturn this, we'll overturn that, we'll overturn this, then the court becomes a part of the legislature. And that is not their job.
I just want to know, why the fuck do they have party affiliations? Like, you brought this up before.
The country has to be party affiliation. I think it's wrong.
There shouldn't be any partisanship when it comes to being a Supreme Court justice. Like, I think they should all be independent. Like, that's just how I feel about it.
But you got to think of it in terms of being human beings. We have our biases, we have our ideologies, our belief systems, and that's just part of being human beings. I think if we wanted,
but you don't go to a local fucking court, right? And I mean, you're not really ever disclose that in court cases if your judge is a Democrat or Republican.
Right.
You know what I mean?
They do if they run, when they run for certain things, they do say it on the ballots.
Yeah.
I think the only way we'd ever get rid of that is if everything was robots. And I think that
we don't want that though. But yeah.
Elon's really on to something with that. I think Elon's got a plan to make all lawyers and all lawmaking an algorithm.
Yeah.
I think that's the best step forward, probably. It'll get rid of biases. It'll just be straight facts and robots.
All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode. I think we should leave it off on that.
Yeah.
We've been recording for a while.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's fun. I think we should do it again. Once a week. I think we should do one once a week.
Yeah, we'll have to like accommodate different formats.
We'll figure it out. I'm not too worried about it. First episode's always rough. I mean, look at Star Wars Episode 1. It's pretty rough. So.
Well, Star Trek Season 1 was also rough. It almost got canceled.
That's true. I mean, look at the Orville Season 1. I'm just saying, 1, is the loneliest number.
Yeah, since the number 2.
So cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening and or watching, and we will catch y'all in the next one.